10 after 3.
Just minutes ago, Quebec was quiet, the kind of early morning stillness that usually precedes a normal winter day. But that calm didn't last. Without warning, a sudden surge of heavy waterlogged snow swept across the province, transforming familiar streets into a hazardous, frozen landscape. Before most alarms even rang, thick wet snow was already clinging to rooftops, burying sidewalks, and bending tree branches under a weight they were never meant to carry. The storm rolled in silently, but its impact was immediate and overwhelming. At 3:12 a.m., the first transformers blew flashing blue against the snowfall. At 3:27, neighborhoods across Montreal began disappearing into total darkness. By sunrise, the province was facing a full-blown winter emergency. Residents who opened their doors stepped into a scene they didn't recognize. Cars half submerged in snow streetlights, dead, and roads coated with a slick mixture of slush and forming ice. This wasn't the slow arrival of winter. It was a sudden strike, sharp, cold, and unforgiving, catching millions off guard. And the storm was only getting started. As the storm pushed deeper into Quebec, Montreal became one of its first victims. The city, usually buzzing even before sunrise, felt strangely muted, as if the storm had pressed pause on everything. By early morning, thick layers of heavy, slushy snow coated the streets. Cars parked along residential blocks were barely recognizable under the mass of white, their mirrors and windshields sealed beneath icy crusts. Buses struggled to climb even gentle slopes, sliding sideways, before drivers cautiously backed down. Downtown, the situation grew worse. Sidewalks vanished beneath knee-deep snowdrifts. Taxi stands were abandoned. Street signs rattled in cold gusts funneled through the high-rise corridors. The St. Lawrence River acted like a snow machine, feeding moisture into the storm and intensifying snowfall in certain districts. While some neighborhoods saw steady flurries, others experienced sudden bursts so dense that visibility dropped to only a few feet. Residents described the morning as surreal, a mix of bright whiteness and total paralysis. People who stepped outside found themselves sinking into slush that swallowed their boots. Others stood in silence, listening to the eerie sound of branches snapping under the weight of the snow. Montreal wasn't just dealing with winter weather. It was battling a storm that seemed determined to bring the city to its knees. While Montreal struggled under the weight of the snow, a far more dangerous crisis unfolded quietly, but relentlessly, across the province: the collapse of the power grid. Before dawn, Hydro-Québec's outage map lit up like a constellation of failure. Entire suburbs flickered, dimmed, and then vanished from the grid. Within hours, more than 300,000 homes were without electricity, a number that kept climbing as branches snapped and power lines sagged under the load of wet, heavy snow. The problem wasn't just the snowfall, it was the timing. Most trees across southern Quebec were still carrying their fall leaves, and the sticky waterlogged snow clung to them like cement. Branch after branch cracked under the weight, crashing onto roads, cars, and electrical lines with alarming speed. Repair crews attempted to respond, but many roads were blocked by downed trees or buried beneath thick snowdrifts. Some teams had to abandon their trucks and continue on foot just to assess the damage. In rural regions west of Montreal, darkness stretched for miles. Not a single house, lit only the faint glow of snow, reflecting street lamps that no longer worked. Residents wrapped themselves in blankets, lit candles, and waited for answers. For many, the storm wasn't just inconvenient. It was a sudden plunge into winter's coldest reality: isolation. Across Quebec, anyone who dared to drive found themselves in a battle they could not win. By sunrise, highways resembled disaster zones, not from a lack of preparation, but from the speed and intensity of the storm. Heavy wet snow coated the asphalt with a slick, invisible layer of ice. Drivers who thought they had control suddenly spun sideways. Cars fishtailed, trucks jackknifed, and entire lanes disappeared under the slush. Emergency services could barely keep up. On Highway 40, a chain reaction pileup stretched nearly the length of a football field. Vehicles crumpled together like discarded metal shells, headlights flickering beneath falling snow. Police urged motorists to stay home, but many were already stuck in place with no way to turn around. In Montreal's suburbs, smaller roads were even worse. Plows struggled to navigate tight neighborhoods where tree limbs blocked half the street. Abandoned cars dotted the roadside, some stuck in snowbanks, others simply left behind when their engines stalled in the cold. Public transit fared no better. Buses crawled at walking speed, and several routes were suspended entirely. Trains faced delays as ice accumulated on track switches, forcing commuters to wait in freezing winds. By mid-morning, the message was clear. Quebec wasn't moving. Winter had taken over. As the storm pushed deeper into Quebec, entire communities found themselves suddenly cut off from the rest of the province. What began as a heavy snowfall quickly transformed into a full-scale isolation crisis. In the Laurentians and Lanaudière regions, rural roads vanished beneath drifts as tall as car windows. Snowplows attempting to clear the routes were forced to retreat when fallen branches downed power lines and abandoned vehicles blocked access. Several towns became unreachable, not by car, not by emergency vehicles, not even by utility crews. For families in remote homes, the blackout was more than an inconvenience. Without electricity, furnaces shut down, cell towers weakened, internet service dropped entirely in some pockets. Temperatures inside houses began to fall, and residents layered coats and blankets in an effort to stay warm. In small villages north of Montreal, volunteer firefighters went door to door on foot, checking on elderly residents and those with medical needs. Some carried portable heaters, others brought bottled water and flashlights, but supplies were limited. Meanwhile, farmers in open rural areas struggled to keep livestock alive as barns flooded with melting ice and roofs strained under the weight of snow. Across the province, the message was the same. This wasn't just a snowstorm, it was isolation on a massive scale. By early afternoon, it became clear that Quebec's emergency response system was fighting a losing battle. Dispatch centers were flooded with calls, downed wires, trapped motorists, medical emergencies, collapsing roofs far beyond what crews could handle at once. Hydro-Québec deployed more than 1,000 workers, but many could not even reach the problem areas. Roads were blocked, visibility dropped to near zero, and strong gusts turned simple tasks into dangerous missions. Some teams were forced to chain up their trucks, while others had to abandon vehicles entirely and proceed on foot. Fire departments across the province activated full emergency protocols. In Montreal, firefighters responded to dozens of calls involving carbon monoxide alarms triggered by residents running generators indoors, a deadly risk during extended blackouts. Ambulances struggled to navigate icy intersections, often escorted by police vehicles clearing the way. Provincial authorities held an emergency briefing, urging residents to stay indoors and conserve battery power. Helicopters were placed on standby, but high winds made takeoff too dangerous. Meanwhile, shelters opened in community centers, schools and churches offering heat blankets and charging stations to families who had lost power for more than 12 hours. Despite non-stop efforts, officials admitted the truth: the storm was moving faster than the response.
Well, he was pouring it.
As daylight faded, Quebec entered its most dangerous phase yet. The storm had already taken out power lines, blocked roads, and isolated communities. But now a far more silent threat crept in the nighttime freeze. Temperatures began to fall rapidly after sunset, dropping below 30 bars, once. Without electricity, countless homes grew colder by the minute. Families layered clothing, lit candles, and huddled together in living rooms as the wind howled outside. For elderly residents and infants, the chill posed a serious risk. In Montreal's high-rise apartments, stairwells went dark, elevators shut down, and residents climbed dozens of flights carrying flashlights and blankets. Downtown streets, once busy, even in winter, were nearly deserted, the only movement coming from plow trucks forcing their way through the slush. Across suburbs like Laval-Longueuil and the Montérégie region, the blackout left entire neighborhoods eerily silent. Pets shivered indoors. Car engines refused to start as batteries weakened in the cold. Grocery stores and gas stations locked their doors early, unable to operate without power. Weather agencies issued new warnings overnight ice could form on every untreated surface, turning morning commutes into a minefield. Inside their darkened homes, Quebecers asked the same quiet question: if this is the first storm of the season, what happens when the real winter arrives? By dawn, the storm had finally begun to weaken, but Quebec's challenges were far from over. The province was left with a landscape of broken branches, powerless neighborhoods, stranded families, and roads buried under layers of snow and ice. Crews continued working tirelessly, but full restoration could take days, even longer, for rural towns hit hardest. For many residents, this wasn't just a winter inconvenience. It was a wake-up call. The first major storm of the season had exposed vulnerabilities across the power grid, transportation systems, and emergency response networks. Meteorologists warned that colder air and more storms were already forming in the northern jet stream, preparing to descend in the weeks ahead. Yet amid the chaos, one thing remained clear: the resilience of Quebecers' neighbors helping neighbors' communities, opening shelters, strangers offering rides, food, and warmth. But winter is only beginning. If you live in a storm-prone region, now is the time to prepare. Check your emergency kits, insulate your home service, your vehicle, and stay alert to weather updates. If you want more real-time coverage of global storms, extreme weather alerts, and safety tips, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Together, awareness saves lives.